This conference will now be recorded.
We're excited to have John Nolan present the presentation today. John is a director of compensation at Exxon Corporation, which is a Fortune 100 company with around 34,000 employees and approximately $33 billion in annual revenues. John is a CCP and a CPA and has earned a master's degree in human resources from Loyola University and a bachelor's degree in accounting from Northern Illinois University. John has 25 years of business experience in both finance function of tax, audit, and operational accounting, and the human resource functions of executive and board-based compensation. So we are very excited to have John present today's topic. Without further ado, John, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Sharon, for your kind introduction. Again, I'm John Nolan, and thanks for taking the time to join me today for a topic that's been very important to me and my colleagues for the last 3 years, and I'm hoping you find some value in it as well. I'm a director of compensation at Exxon here in Chicago, and just a little more background on Exxon as it's kind of central to our story. Exxon, like Sharon said, is a Fortune 100 company. We're one of the largest energy companies in the country, no matter what measure or what metric you use. We're headquartered here in Chicago, where we have a large presence here. We also have a large presence in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Texas, and we operate in 48 states and a little bit in Canada. So let's get started. First, the stories I'm going to share today are based on an article I did for the September issue of the World at Work magazine, Workspan, and you can see the issue cover there in the lower right-hand corner. So if you like the material we're going to cover today, I encourage you to take a look at the article as well. And the article and the presentation are really about mine and my compensation group's transition from our prior HRIT system to a cloud-based system and the lessons we learned along the way. And those lessons are broken out here on this page. Lesson one, really embracing ownership of the project, and that includes taking responsibility for the success of the implementation, participating in the system selection, meeting frequently with the implementation teams, advocating for the requirements that you need to run your system, and running new and legacy systems in parallel if that's at all possible. Lesson two was focusing on system design and development, and that includes developing complete and detailed system requirements, keeping close to system developers, and adopting system functionality where practical. And finally, lesson three is to test the system thoroughly, and that includes scheduling plenty of time for testing, reconciling requirements to your test scripts, testing with full and complete system data, having a system to record testing issues and resolutions, and having defects fixed prior to go live. So first, just want to talk a little bit about the technical background of the project. Up at the top, we have the process we went through, and it's straightforward. We made the decision to go to the cloud. We chose our vendor. We developed a project plan. We documented the system requirements that we needed. We then went about building the system and then testing the system, and then went live with the system. And we started looking for a new system back in 2014, so it was quite a long process for us. We were with our prior system. We were in PeopleSoft for about 15 years, so jumping systems was a big deal for us. And we had to find a system that would accommodate, again, 34,000 employees, exempt, non-exempt, and bargaining unit employees, and a workforce that was both in the U.S. and a little bit in Canada. And we had a cross-functional team to assess the three different vendors we were going to look at. We included HR and IT, finance, supply, and other folks. And we assessed Workday, Oracle, and SuccessFactors. We personally chose Oracle and went ahead with their Fusion product, and that's what we implemented. Our compensation module was again part of a full HRIS system implementation. So in addition to the comp planning system we were implementing, we were also putting in core HR, payroll, recruiting, benefits, talent management, and other functions as well. And the project had many stakeholders: IT, accounting, supply, governance, audit, and many external vendors. But to be clear, I mean, every employee is really a stakeholder when you cut over systems, because every employee gets a paycheck, has benefits, has performance evaluations, has a personnel file. And also, really, every function in the company is a stakeholder, because every function relies on the HRIT system for reporting, compliance, and active employee monitoring for security to systems and to physical location. So, and with the internal and the external stakeholders, it can be difficult to get all of their time and attention to cooperate, because even though you've made a decision to go ahead and change systems, it affects a lot of people who did not make that decision along with you, but are forced to kind of participate. And you can get different levels of participation, and some of the folks just aren't happy that it's just more for them to do and more difficult for them. So we got to be kind of tactful and work with those groups. The transition took well over a year for us, and it cut across 2 compensation planning seasons, which was really difficult. And it was really a tale of 2 compensation seasons for us. The first cycle is where we stumbled a bit and really didn't take ownership of the process that we needed to, and it was very difficult for us. But in the second season, we had really taken ownership of our implementation process, and the outcome was much better. So, if at all possible, try to keep any implementation that you do to. I'd recommend 1 compensation season at the most. Doing it through 2 was really difficult. While the technical background of the story is very important, I think the most important lessons we learned were on the practical side. And the primary lessons we learned were really related to ownership and project management, including navigating the unknown and doubt. And on the right there, kind of humorously, I have a picture of the river of doubt that's in the Amazon, but it serves as a pretty good metaphor for the project. Because the river of doubt, for many years, nobody knew where it started, what its tributaries were, and what was along the river. And that's really kind of the same way you go into a system implementation. There's a lot of doubts. You're not quite sure how you're going to get all the work done, if you have enough resources to do it all, if you have enough budget, and if you'll be able to, and you'll immediately think of 4 large obstacles that you're going to have to get over that when you start, you have no idea how you're going to do it. So there's a lot of doubts and unknown. And on the practical side, it's going to take a lot of project management. You're going to have to manage both outside and inside of your function. As HR and comp professionals, we're used to managing within our function and with materials that we're usually the subject matter experts. But in this process, you're going to be a lot less familiar and a lot more vulnerable, because you're not going to know the process and all the pieces. So it'll really challenge your project management abilities. And you'll have to interact with many new players, both internal and external. Some are long-term, some are short-term, and they'll have varying degrees of engagement. And you're going to have to learn how to manage and deal with each of them. It'll challenge your discipline and your judgment. To do the right thing when you need to. It's a difficult process, and sometimes you're tired and you put in long hours, and you may see a problem or an issue that you might wish you didn't see, but you got to have the discipline to address it and make sure it gets taken care of. So the project certainly tested I think, everybody on the project's discipline and judgment. And it'll help you hone your insights and intuition, because this is a kind of a one-time project and one you're not used to. You're really going to have to depend on how things look and feel and how it strikes you. So you'll have to make decisions and bring up issues if things just aren't looking and feeling right. And that's certainly something we experienced in our process. You'll need to balance aggressiveness and tolerance. Certainly aggressiveness, because you're going to have to get things done and hold people accountable, and that's going to take a bit of an aggressive nature. But you're also going to have to be tolerant as well, because these are your teammates you're going to be working the whole process with. You're going to want to be balance your aggressiveness with patience and respect and respectfulness. Because it's the right thing to do, and also because throughout the process, you're going to probably have to go to everybody and get help from everybody. So you just want to make sure you're balancing those two items. It'll increase your comfort for conflict. Certainly in the daily meetings, there's high tension, and people can be emotional about the things they want to get done. So, you're going to have to work on getting comfort with conflict and controlling your emotions. And prioritizing your objectives. When you start on the project, you're going to have a full list of items you want to accomplish. I find it hard to believe that anybody can get them all done, so you're really going to have to prioritize what are the most important items. And managing resources, you're going to have to toggle you and your team back and forth between the project and also your regular day work. So that's going to take managing of resources, moving people back and forth. And you're also likely going to have consultants and contractors that are going to be helping you that you're going to have to manage as well. Okay, lesson one is embracing ownership. And you really need to take responsibility for the implementation success. As I said, we kind of stumbled out of the gate a bit because we kind of failed to adapt or realize what the ownership of the project meant. We had to realize that we were not customers of a purchased product, like a brand new shiny red car there that we could just get in and drive and kind of see how it worked and all the cool new features. We were mistaken, and that's what we thought it would kind of be. What we realized we really were system implementers of an assembly kit. That bottom picture is really kind of more indicative of what we had to do and what we were doing. So when we realized we were off track in our expectations, we really had to change our perspective. We had to make the psychological and emotional jump to really commit to the project and resigning ourselves to, the work that goes along with it, the long hours, the hard work, the nights, and some of the weekends. And the bottom bullet there, only you can manage the system to a successful implementation. And, I'm not being cynical there. You're not going to have to do it alone, and it's not going to be all on your shoulders. But in the end, you're the one who cares most that this system or module has been implemented correctly. You're the one who knows the details and how the system is supposed to work. And quite frankly, after the system's implemented, you're the ones that are going to have to deal with the consequences of the system after go live. So you really need to, take responsibility to make sure you get a successful implementation. Okay, you want to make sure you're participating in system selection. Choosing the system is a big deal. This is the environment that you're going to be working in daily and the tool that you're going to use to get your work done. So you want to absolutely advocate for what you believe is the best system. You want to be an active stakeholder in the selection process. So if you're not included in those conversations, make sure you elbow your way in. You want to research the systems and vendors on your own. See what the best systems are from a compensation perspective. You can host vendor demonstrations. The vendors will be very happy to come out and do a demo and spend hours telling you, how good their system is. So that's something you can definitely do to get a handle on it. And you'll want to solicit recommendations from your compensation community, your CCA and World at Work friends. Reach out to those communities and see what everybody's using and see how they like their systems. And once you do select a system, you want to immediately kind of let the broader project plan about your compensation planning needs, let them know when what the timing and the dependencies are for your compensation planning season and process. And you want to make sure to pay attention to the order of the module implementation. And I've got a warning flag there because in our first compensation planning season, it was a bit of an issue for us. The compensation module was among the first modules to be implemented, and we did it prior to the core HR and payroll modules, which really have the core system data. And we ran our compensation planning process for our year end using, the new front end system, but using our legacy core HR and payroll systems for processing. And it really made it very difficult. Converting the data back and forth between two systems was very difficult. It caused system processing errors, data quality issues, and security access failures. So, my strong advice is if you're going to implement, really try to put the source data modules like core HR and payroll, implement those first before you implement your compensation module, and then you can run that information through one system out of the compensation module. Okay, meet frequently with your implementation teams. When we were off to a slow start, we were really only attending 1 or 2 system update meetings a week. That clearly wasn't enough. So once we got more engaged, we went to many daily meetings that really devoured our calendars for months at a time. And our compensation subgroup met really frequently. We would meet multiple times a day, especially as we were kind of getting our process back on track. We would meet in the morning early in the morning, decide what we were doing for the day and what everybody's responsibilities were. And we would meet, throughout the day where we would actually do the work of, designing and building. And then at the end of the day, we'd meet again to decide, what we've done and if we've gone far enough or if more work needed to be done that evening. And like I said, different people have different levels of engagement. So, some people will feel like you're meeting too frequently because, again, people have varying degrees of skin in the game. But for those of us who are accountable to make sure the system got implemented, it was very important for us to have the multiple meetings. So, my suggestion would be to have those and try to get people on board. And for your most important meetings, err on the side of scheduling those out for the full duration of the project and maybe even for a month after the project's scheduled to end. Because if you get delayed or you have to do post-implementation things, getting on people's calendars is difficult. Throughout the project, people's calendars get really crowded. So, you want to make sure that you're making your space in those calendars. And, you can always cancel a meeting afterwards. Nobody ever complains about getting a meeting canceled from their calendar. So err on the side of doing that. And the system really gives you the opportunity to build and deepen relationships. We certainly did. It's a rare opportunity to build some long-term relationships that can really help you for years to come, meaning people from accounting and IT and people in different locations, people that you can reach out to in the future for help with other problems and issues. So really make the most of that opportunity to get to know some of your internal colleagues as well. And you're going to have to build relationships with some consultants as well. And, the definition of consultants here, at least for us in our project, they were the more strategic people that were helping us implement. So they were helping plan and execute the plan. And for them, you need to set their priorities, and you're going to have to coordinate when they roll on and roll off. And sometimes you have to make mid-process changes. We had one consultant in the beginning who I like to think of as kind of a wartime invading general. And he kind of helped us get back on track, but he was very gruff and rubbed people the wrong way quite a bit. And he damaged some relationships along the way. So really, as soon as his value was eclipsed by his toxicity, we had to roll him off the project and get a new one. And, we were able to replace him with, what I would call a better occupying general, somebody who kind of smoothed out relationships and kept the trains running on time. But, after a while, the time came to roll that person off the project as well. So coordinating them is something you're going to be responsible to do. Contractors, again, for us, the definition of a contractor, I like to think of them more as the technical builders, those people that are in the back room with the hood open, actually making the system do what you want to do. And they were more like free agents. They would come in for weeks at a time or months at a time, and you would see them in meetings, but then they kind of go back to wherever they were going to work on the system. And you get varying degrees of effectiveness with them. So you just want to make sure you're getting what you need out of them. And we would see really great periods of productivity out of some of the contractors, 15 or 18 hours of work, and then you'd send them a question or try to get a hold of them, and they'd be non-responsive for 1 or 2 days. So our suspicion was that some of the contractors actually arrange their schedule so that they can work on different projects at once. And, many of them did negotiate on the front end saying they would only be on site 1 or 2 days a week, or they couldn't work 2 days in a row on site. So the suspicion there is, they're working for multiple companies doing the implementation, and they work really hard at one place and then move on to another and then come back a day or two later. So if that's important for your project, you just want to make sure you understand and work with them as to when they'll be on site. You're going to have to advocate for your requirements. You'll have to advocate for what will be the best advantage for your system and your company. And there's a lot of competing priorities in the project. So you may have to get out your bullhorn once in a while and scream at the project leads and let them know that certain things aren't being done, or certain things are falling behind and you need their help. And there'll be a project timeline and plans, but you really have to sit down and map the project out yourself and timeline it out for yourself. And as you're doing that, keep an open mind and remain solutions focused on how you can get the work done. You may have to come up with some unorthodox approaches. During our project, we had a situation where when we were getting back on track, we were doing the reassessment, and the reassessment, I think, was scheduled for 4 to 6 weeks. And as we kind of mapped out the work for the reassessment, we kind of came to the understanding that if we did the full reassessment, we would miss our go-live date. So we had to talk to the project leadership and kind of take the unorthodox approach of starting to rebuild our module while we were still going through the reassessment. So we were doing kind of parallel work there. So we had to, be solutions focused there and talk to leadership to understand how we could make it work. And you want to be careful to make sure that you're not talking past each other with your developers and your consultants, and take nothing for granted. Again, if we just followed the project plan that they put together, we would have missed our go live date. And it wasn't a thought of ours at all that they would put a project plan together where we would actually miss our date. So you got to take kind of responsibility for that. And to do that, you have to ask a lot of pointed questions about what the project's processes are, who are the resources you're going to have and when they're going to be available, what the timelines look like. You're going to have to participate in contentious discussions, trying to get your priorities set ahead of other people. And you're going to have to lobby to get timelines changed, responsibilities and priorities changed. And that's exactly what we had to do in that instance in our project. If you can, you're going to want to try to run the new and legacy systems in parallel. Again, it's a nice thing to do, but to be honest, we did not do this. We did lobby to try to do it, but we just didn't have the time and the resources. But if you do, it does allow you to gain confidence in your new system, because you'll be able to compare the results out of your old system and the new system, and you'll have a tried and true kind of result to compare against the new system's results. And you might even find some gaps that you had in the old system. But if you're able to run both systems at once, it also provides an insurance policy. If the new system stalls or fails, especially during a critical time, you can switch back over to the old system. But it's not an easy ask, maintaining two systems. It does put quite a burden on your IT people. They're going to have to try to, keep two plates spinning, and also on you, because if you're getting different results out of two systems, you're going to have to perform the reconciliations to determine, what's going wrong and straighten all that out. And it could trigger a lot of work and questions. So you just want to be careful about that. And then if you are able to run them in parallel, you have to decide, what's the right amount of time to do that for. 1 or 2 months is probably ideal, or if you have a compensation planning process coming up, to run it through both of those, that would probably be ideal, from what we were thinking anyways. Okay, cutting over to lesson 2, focusing on system design and development. First, develop complete and detailed system requirements, which is, a cornerstone of a good process. And when you develop good system requirements, it's long and detailed work, and unfortunately, it's only rewarded with more long and detailed work. Putting together and mapping out and documenting system requirements is painstakingly writing the details of all your processes and your systems. And because it's difficult, you're going to want to use many different formats and schedule longer and shorter meetings to keep it straight, or to keep it fresh. You'll want to use Word and Excel, process charts, whiteboards, flip charts, really any format or medium you can think of. And you'll want to err on over-explaining and providing too many examples to make sure that that your needs are clear. And you can't do this alone or in a vacuum. I know sometimes it's tempting to say you're going to sit by yourself and read the whole thing out and write the whole thing out in a certain amount of time. But you're going to have meaningful conversations with your compensation colleagues and with those colleagues that are in HR and IT and the different systems folks. To challenge each other and really understand what's going on. When we did our system requirements, we had about 220 lines of requirements, and those were broken out with paragraphs and sub-descriptions and sub-requirements. So it was really a lot of information. And we really have a good team of compensation professionals that have really decades of experience and are smart and dedicated and who live their, professional lives in the compensation process day in and day out. And none of them knew every piece of the process. Everyone had gaps of understanding and misunderstandings of how things work. So you got to make sure everybody brings their piece of the puzzle to put together to kind of develop the whole picture. It's really important. Okay, you really need to keep close to your developers. You should be spending hours of time walking them through each requirement. So after you just went through all that difficulty with your colleagues developing system requirements, now you're going to have to do kind of a line by line, sometimes excruciating discussion with systems IT developers. And those developers, when they get your requirements, they should be, inundating you with questions and continuously reviewing and brainstorming and discussing things. And if they're not, I've got the warning sign there, because that's really a sign of trouble. And we experienced that early on in our process. We handed over our design documents and our system requirements. And we had this idea that, the developers were in some magical workshop bringing our dreams to life. And that just wasn't the case. And we didn't get any questions from them or any comments. So again, we were assuming that things were going well. But when we finally got to look into the system that would have been built, there were things that were wrong and things that were misunderstood. And we had to spend a lot of time, clarifying with them what the requirements are and rebuilding pieces of the system. So again, my strong advice here, if your system developers are not coming to you, go to them. Get on their schedule on a regular basis and make sure you're walking through all the requirements and keep them close. What might seem obvious to you may not be obvious to a developer. They think a little bit differently and have a different frame of mind. So again, be repetitive and err on the side of over-explaining. And then our last major bullet there, a little humor, fear and loathing in system development. Everybody will have that horrible feeling at some point that you forgot to include some system detail or requirement and things are progressing without it. So you just need to bring that to light right away. One of our project managers was kind of inspirational and reminded us all the time that, unlike wine, bad news does not get better with age, and it's absolutely true. The more you let it linger or kind of let it fester, the worse it is. So make sure if you run into that problem that you get it out to the people that can help you right away. And this is kind of where you'll be glad that you've maintained good relationships with your colleagues. Going back to the beginning of the presentation, this is where that tolerance and patience with your colleagues can really pay off. Okay, do yourself a favor and try to adopt the system functionality where it's practical. So use the function the way it was built and intended to be built. Be open to how the system's working and try to learn what it's doing instead of trying to make the system, kind of backfit to your policies and processes. And, this could be a good excuse for you to change some policies and processes. You can go to, people who are hesitant to change and just let them know that the new system doesn't work the way the old one does, and we're going to have to change. So you want to be flexible. The way you're doing it currently isn't the only way to do it. And by adopting the functionality of the system, you can really avoid expensive modifications. When a system implementation is priced out, it'll only have a certain amount of modifications. And if you're continuously trying to fit the new system to your policies, you may run into expensive modifications that aren't covered by the original contract. So it's an opportunity to avoid those. It's an opportunity to avoid time delays and an opportunity to get in line with market practices. Because if it was built into the system, hopefully that's more of a market practice. And if it's something you've been trying to implement, that can help you do that. And it may also give you the opportunity to do away with any manual workarounds that you're currently doing. So look for opportunities. We all get used to our workarounds and we think they're part of our process, but they're really not. So look for the opportunities to the things that you're doing manually on the side to implement into the system. And sometimes just simply by implementing the system functionality, you might even be accused of being innovative, which is a great adjective these days. So give yourself the chance to be that. Heading into the home stretch, lesson 3, testing the system. You want to make sure that you schedule plenty of time for testing. Work closely with your system implementer and your project plan developers to develop a robust and thorough testing process plan, and make sure you understand the plan and what tests you're gonna use, because there's a lot of different integration processes that have a lot of different testing plans and a lot of jargon. I mean, some of the testing that came up in our conversion was system integration testing, conversion, performance, smoke testing. regression, stress, unit testing. So you just got to understand what each of those testing tracks is doing and what your involvement with those are. And I've got user acceptance testing there highlighted in red because, in my opinion, that's easily the most important one. And we'll talk about that again here in a minute. But as you're going through your testing plan, you want to make sure that there's plenty of time budgeted to fix defects. You're absolutely going to find issues and defects when you're testing, and you want to make sure you have plenty of time to get those fixed. Be realistic about the time it will take and the resources needed. You probably only have a few people who can be qualified testers to test your system, so make sure that you've got the resources over the right amount of time to get that done, and be flexible with your timing to fix the defects, and be prepared for off-hours testing on nights and weekends, because sometimes when you find a defect, the developers will fix it either at night or on weekends, and the whole process may be being held up, waiting for you to get into the system and retest that functionality and get it passed. So you may be called on nights and weekends that, hey, something's just been fixed. We need you to get in there. We need you to run the test again. And if it passes, go ahead and the whole project can move forward. So you need to be prepared to be flexible. And absolutely resist the temptation to cut testing for time overruns. This will increase your personal risk on the project. In my opinion, you'd be better off, if at all possible, to add resources or time to the project plan rather than cutting any of your testing. And if you do end up being directed that you have to cut some testing, make sure that project leadership is aware of it and aware of the risks, and you have their approvals. I've been part of several large system implementations, and I'm sure you all have as well. And just in my experience, it's never failed that when times get tight, people want to cut testing, and it adds a lot of risk. So absolutely make sure everybody understands where you're at with that, because when you get to production, if something breaks, the first question that's going to be asked is, why wasn't this found in testing? And you're going to have a good answer. So make sure you develop a good plan, you stick to it, and if you don't, that you get approval to change it. And our last bullet there is, again, user acceptance testing. And like I said, in my opinion, probably the most important testing. It's where you as the process owner and the module owner sign off and accept responsibility. It's kind of the handing off of the keys. So you have to, when you do take responsibility for it, you absolutely want to make sure that everything's been built to your satisfaction, all the requirements have been tested and are included, the designs and the design documents have been met. And really, if you're uncomfortable with it, don't sign off, because like I said, it's you're really taking ownership, and any fixes or problems with the system after that, you're going to share in a lot of the responsibility. So be careful with user acceptance testing. And for your testing, make sure you reconcile all the requirements from your requirements documents to the test scripts. You will want to verify that each and every requirement that you documented is represented in those test scripts and is getting tested in the system. You can develop, you can include a reference column in your requirements document, or you can develop a separate tracking sheet that ties each of the requirements to the test scripts, but absolutely make sure you do that cross-reference and every one of the requirements is tested. And you want to verify that every test is run by at least 2 knowledgeable testers, just to make sure nothing's missed. The next bullet there is you want to be demanding and reject weak scripts. It's very easy to build really weak scripts and pass them. In our first go around, we had some scripts that were weak and really didn't test the system. And then when we went to production, when there were some problems, they developed there because it wasn't tested in the test scripts. So you really want to make sure that they're robust, difficult tests, and that you get all that done before you go to production. And you want to be collaborative in your script writing. This was an issue in our project. We had a lot of discussions around who is actually the right person to do or the right group to do the script writing. Was it the system owners? Probably not. We're not as knowledgeable about the detailed, back workings of the system. Is it the developers who built the system? They're probably a little too close to it, and it's their work that's being tested. So we kind of came to the determination that it was probably the system implementing group that should probably write the test scripts. And again, they shouldn't do that in a vacuum. They should work closely with you as the system owners and with the developers as the people who put the who worked on the system itself. So it's got to be kind of a collaborative process. Again, because if something breaks when you go to production, the first question is going to be why wasn't this uncovered in testing? So you want to make sure it's good, strong testing and everyone's involved. Then you want to test with full, complete, and accurate system data. When you're in user acceptance testing, it's not a kick the tires before you drive it off the lot kind of testing. It's a running it into a brick wall to make sure the airbags go off kind of testing. So by all means, don't be tepid about the testing that you're doing or being afraid of breaking the system or finding errors. That's absolutely your job, and it's better to really test it hard now and break it or find defects now than to find it in production. So, I mean, really, when you find an error or defect, take joy in the fact that you've avoided the pain and embarrassment of the defect or error being uncovered in production. And, do not sign off user acceptance testing without doing the user acceptance testing with full and accurate data in the test environment. It's another temptation to only load, a small amount of data or a subset of data into the testing environment and run the testing then. But that's not really going to give you the strong testing that you need. You really want to include, every oddball, misshaped, prorated exception to the rule that every compensation and every data system has. So make sure those are all in there, because you're going to want to know how your new system responds to these peculiarities. So make sure they're all in there, and don't let them talk you into just using a small subset of data. Again, we've got the warning sign there. If you do only use a small subset, you'll really have a false sense of security. You won't really know how fast, what the speed of the system is if you don't have all of your data in there, and you won't know what kind of stress the system can take unless you have all the information in there. And when you get to production, if that's the first time the system has seen all your information, it could break down, and you want to avoid that. So be cautious. Okay, have a system to record testing issues and resolutions, and this system will really help you avoid anything from sliding through the cracks. And what you'll do is, anytime you run into an issue or a defect, you'll categorize it as critical, high, medium, or low. And you want to be careful there, because there's some subjectivity in how you'll categorize these errors or defects. And there could be rules around the project. For instance, the project won't go live if there are any medium or higher defects. So you could face some pressure, to downgrade some of your defects so that, the project can move forward or go live. And you really want to be strong. If you really think there's an issue, don't change the level of severity, and make sure you're accurate in how you decide how critical it is. And another thing to be careful of is make sure you don't get a defect recategorized as an enhancement. Sometimes you'll get pressure from somewhere in the project to say, well, that's not really a defect, that's just an enhancement we can fix later on. And if that's not the case, if you need it before you go live, again, don't let them recategorize defects as enhancements. And when you have this system of record, you want to make sure you have a regularly scheduled meeting to discuss it. For us, it kind of became the centerpiece of our morning meeting, discussing all of the defects and where we're at with them. And it's just not defects. Anytime you're testing the system, you want to see how it looks and feels and bring those items up. You're not just constrained to what you're testing in the system. Even cosmetic things, if you want to see things a different way or a different color or have a box moved, get that noted. And those can frequently be quick fixes that the designers or developers can do for you. Have an aging system for all your defects so items don't get stale. Make sure there's a responsible person who's accountable for getting the defect fixed. Make sure there's an estimated completion date, so if it's running late, again, you can hold people accountable. And make sure there's a plan for retesting and sign off of the defect. You just can't rely on people to say, yeah, we fixed it, go ahead. You have to get back in line with retesting of that defect and make sure it does test out correctly and sign off. And make sure everybody's in agreement that it is indeed fixed now before it comes off of the list. You want to have all defects fixed prior to go live if possible, and this may seem obvious, but there's going to be lingering small size defects that could go on past the go live, but you just want to make sure you get as many done as possible. And we've got a note there, that first bullet about security testing, and we've got the warning sign there. Again, test security over and over again. Certainly, like I said, when we were mixing systems, that was an issue for us. A lot of it was because we were mixing systems. But even in our second go around, we put a lot of emphasis on testing security of the system. And even the morning when we were going to go live, we tested security again. And sure enough, the reporting group, another group in the project, had changed something which allowed, some of our users to have access to reports that they shouldn't have, which we were able to, shut off immediately. But you have to be wary of that somebody could do something in the system. It's a new system, and you don't know what some of the unintended consequences of what people might be doing are. So you just continue to test the security. Even after you go live, we were testing it multiple times a day to make sure everything was okay. Again, if you have to go live with a few low-level or non-critical defects, make sure that you have them well documented. Who's responsible to fix them after the system goes live. When are they going to be fixed? Who's going to do the retesting, and who's going to be responsible for signing off, and where's the money going to come from? Because after a system goes live, very quickly resources start to dry up, contractors start to disappear, budgets are tapped out, and project momentum can really wane quickly. So if you don't want to get stuck with a lifetime of manual manual workarounds for some small items, make sure you get it fixed as much as possible in the system. And we had even saved some of our budget for after go live to address a couple of issues. And sure enough, after go live, our surplus budget got swept into the general budget to offset overspend somewhere else. So don't wait till afterwards. Get it done as quickly as you can during the project itself. And as we're wrapping up here, I covered a lot of the things we learned along the way about embracing ownership, focusing on system design and development, and testing thoroughly. But for me, ultimately, the project really needs a commitment to get things right. It needs involvement from the compensation group from beginning to end. And you continuously need to study the implementation through the eyes of your compensation process and work with all of the implementation teams to verify that the system delivers what the compensation process requires. So you want to make sure that happens. And a final note, it'll never be perfect or complete. A year later, we're still developing processes and doing some workarounds and developing reporting. But get as much as you can done during the project, and you'll be better off. Post implementation time. But that kind of wraps it up. I just want to thank everybody for your time and attention, and I'm happy to field any questions you have.
So if anyone would like to ask John any questions, you can now take this time to type it in the chat box, and we'll give you a couple minutes. Otherwise, we can wrap this up.
Yeah, I do see a question here, and it has to do with system security and how sensitive the data is. And, you know, for the person who asked the question, yeah, it's absolutely, like I said, one of our most difficult things. It just took a lot of personal handling and a lot of paying attention to the system provided security features and getting people on the project who knew the system security or learned the system security, and then just making sure you worked with them to get it done. There's no real simple answer, at least there wasn't for us, and we just had to keep testing to make sure that you know, security you know, was being kept secured. It looks like somebody else had a question that how long is our compensation planning cycle, and were we able to reduce the timing of the full cycle with our new system? Well, you know, I think like most groups, we kind of ramp up. We're ramping up right now. The, you know, November, December time frame. They're, you know, prepping the system and training and things like that, and then we kind of wrap up the process in late February and early March. So that's kind of the time frame. Like I said, we've been implementing for a couple of years. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reduce our cycle with the new system as we keep you know, keep knowing more and more about it and are better at running it. But as for right now, as we're still in kind of getting used to it and understanding mode, at this point we haven't been able to reduce any of the worker time yet. But like I said, we are hopeful.